Hi everyone, and thank you for watching my video. I got a beautiful day going. It's kind of cloudy, but it's nice. It's a lot warmer. The season's changing and feels good. I don't have to wear a coat today, so it's nice. I'm thankful for that. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about the relationship between the sun, the cycles of the sun, the evolution of technology, and illnesses on the planet of a mass scale, like pandemics and other illnesses too. And I'm going to look for relationships. And I'll tell you now that I'm not going to reveal to you anything really big or huge, but I am going to reveal to you some things that you probably weren't aware of and that will still maybe surprise you. So I'm gonna run through about the past 300 years in the evolution of technology and what happened as technology evolved. And also I'll talk about the cycles of the sun, how they progressed while all this was happening, and how they affected one another. So I'll get started. Back in the 1700s, so we're going 300 years back in the 1700s, this is when electricity, people became really fascinated with it. And they didn't really know how to use it. They were really fascinated with it, and they knew about it, but they didn't know how to use it. They knew that it could do something big. They just didn't know what to do with it, what to make of it. And during this time, a big discovery changed all of that, or an invention called the Leydig jar. The Leydig jar, it's like a jar with a fluid in it that allowed electricity to be stored. And this is very primitive. It was back in the 1700s. So after the invention of the Leydig jar and the storing of electricity, mankind was able to play with electricity and really extensively. And while mankind experimented and played with it, a lot of it was just entertainment and fascination. It wasn't for any real purpose, really. But while mankind played with the electricity with the Leydig jar, what was discovered was that electricity could be used to treat and cure different illnesses of human body. And the way they learned this, I skipped something. What happened first, the way they learned this was that they discovered that electricity had an effect on the human body as well as the body of other creatures and animals. They realized that there was an interaction between electricity and the human body. It could do things to the human body. It could change. It could affect the functioning of the human body. And after this discovery, they began using it to treat illnesses and cure people. Very primitively, of course, because it's the 1700s and no one really knew exactly what it was. They just knew it worked, and they ran with it from there. So as time went on, they continued to play with it. They tweaked it. They learned more and more about how to use it medically, and it had a pretty high success rate in how well it could heal people. But it also there were lots of side effects, and it caused lots of problems. There were lots of illnesses and like neurological problems that a lot of people encountered as side effects of dealing with it. Even the people who didn't have issues with it. Any people who initially didn't have any health problems, some of them got health problems just from being around this, this toying with electricity so much. And mankind became really, really aware in the 1700s through all of this trial and error that electricity was a gift and it was a curse. It could heal people, but because it was so primitive, it could really mess people up too and give them neurological problems, all types of problems that you get from being exposed to electromagnetic fields and electricity, especially when it's uncontrolled. And the next century, the 1800s, when the 1800s began, in the 1700s, they became well aware that it could be good, but it was also very dangerous and required a high degree of responsibility. But in the 1800s, the battery was invented. The invention of the battery. Now they had the ability to store electricity and use it in a really organized way, in a really efficient way. Nothing like the Leydig jar, far more advanced now. And the next invention, the next big leap in technology was the telegram. And the telegram allowed mankind to communicate over far distances for the first time ever. You could communicate in a very short period of time for the first time ever over long distances. So the battery technology and the telegram, those technologies merged. And at that point, because this was so cutting edge in technology, the technology was so cutting edge, no one cared about the ill effects of the technology. We got this new technology. I guess a good example is think about our cell phones that we have today. Imagine if someone tried to take your cell phone away from you because it was dangerous. It affected your health. You and probably I myself too. You would get real upset about that, and you wouldn't go down without a fight. And that's and I'm saying that to say how addictive technology is, even if it's no good. And a lot of us, we know that you have to be responsible with it, and you have to be disciplined about how much you use and when you use it. Now, so in the 1800s, the telegram, the battery, and at this point they began to extensively lay out a power grid in order to support this new technology, the telegram. They laid out the power grid all over the developed world, or first world. So this was laid out all over the world, and shortly right after this happened, or almost immediately actually, you could follow the route of the technology. Usually the technology followed transportation routes, and if you followed these routes anywhere in the world, wherever it was laid out, you could find new illnesses, new diseases that were electromagnetic or neurological type of illnesses. Anyway, if you follow the transportation route, the power grid, you found illnesses, and you found a lot more illnesses than anywhere else. So it was pretty clear then that this wasn't safe, and people were really ignoring, ignoring a lot of things just because you had this new technology. They didn't want to think of it in any bad light, so they ignored the side effects and negativity of it. And at the end of the 1800s, another huge leap, huge innovation of technology happened and was implemented all over the globe on a wide scale. It was the light bulb. Around, I think it was the year 1889. The light bulb was extensively rolled out all over the world in nations that were ready for that had power grid already. It was laid out. And what happened immediately at this time, a pandemic happened. Take a look at the screen to see which pandemic. Well, a pandemic happened at this time. And what was the sun doing in the sky when this pandemic happened? The sun was at a sunspot minimum. There was a minimum amount of sunspots. And as you'll see, while I keep, it's talking about all of these things, you're going to see a pattern with the sunspot cycles and with illnesses. But this time there was a very low number of sunspots, and usually when there's an extreme where the sunspots are really low or really high, then it has a really easy to see effect on these illnesses, viruses, infections. So the light bulb, the world's lit up. The world's lit up. So we got we at this point we have electromagnetic pollution and illnesses and problems, and we have the light bulb and the type of problems that the light bulb created beyond this pandemic that happened right away, right after it was implemented, was that a lot of people became dependent on drugs and sleeping pills and different medications to fix the problem that the light bulbs created, this new technology. And a pattern of what I'm talking about here that you're going to continue to see is that whenever you introduce some new foreign artificial energy into your life, it's a huge shock. It's a huge shock to everyone, huge shock to the body, and there's consequences, and they're never well thought out. Throughout history, you think we have learned, and we haven't learned. I guess we're still making the adaptations, and some people, they're never going to fix anything anyway, even if they do know how bad things are. So the next notable situation that happened was around the 19 teens. During the 19 teens, this was the time when World War I was a thing, around the 19 teens. And during this time, the United States, get ready, United States again. United States has created lots of problems. The United States, in order to prepare for the war and be well equipped and ahead of everything, United States extensively developed their radio system, their radio frequency system. So in order for communication during war. And in 1917 was when the U.S. first started using this stuff extensively. And what also happened in 1917 was the biggest pandemic in recorded human history. It was the Spanish flu, but it wasn't Spanish at all. They just called it a Spanish flu. And the Spanish flu killed way over 20 million people, estimate 20 to 40 million people. And this was a really deadly problem, and it coincided this span of time where radio technology, radio towers were extensively put out, and this disease or this pandemic was known as the Navy pandemic. They thought it came from the Navy, but really the Navy is where the electromagnetic, the the radio towers were used the most. So I guess it was associated with the Navy for that reason. And what was the sun doing at this time? The sun this time was at a sunspot maximum. Take a look at this. Take a look at it. It was at a sunspot maximum. And let me just talk about the Spanish flu a little bit, because it was so strange, so unique, so different from the other pandemics, and it was part of, and for that reason it was very difficult to contain. But the Spanish flu, it took out it took out the best people. The people between 20 and 40 years old were the most vulnerable people. That's who this took out. And that was really odd, because usually it's, we have this, what's going on now, it takes out the most vulnerable people. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, later as we progress through the time scale. And also with the Spanish flu, there was never any evidence that it could be passed on from person to person. Doctors and scientists, in order to try to learn how this was, to try to fix the pandemic, they actually gave people the virus on purpose. They tried to give it to them on purpose, but they couldn't spread it that way. So this wasn't really a virus as we know viruses. It couldn't, like people in the same household, some people would get it and then other family members wouldn't get it. Or in the same household, two people would get two different strands, and it just didn't make sense. So they didn't get it from each other. So it's really strange. And with that pandemic, it's very questionable about whether it was actually a virus, or as we know, a virus. And after this pandemic, the sun was at a sunspot peak, and some of the experts think that because the sun was at a peak, it made the peoples with the strongest immune system, it made their immune systems overreact, and that's why they were more susceptible than the very old or the very young. Like it took out the strongest people, 20 to 40 years old, and the fittest people. It took out the most fit, healthiest people. So they think the sun cycle and this new radio energy suddenly introduced all at the same time. It made the people with already strong immune systems, their immune systems just overreact, and they couldn't handle it, and they died very fast. And people with like a weakened immune system, they were spared. Their immune system didn't overreact because they were already kind of low already. And from that point on, after